They thought it would be funny to give the quiet black girl a violin she didn't ask for. But what happens when the joke stops being funny? Let us know in the comments section below where you're watching from today. You, Mr. Douglas said, not even looking up from the clipboard. Francesca Langston, violin. Her name echoed for a second in the silence of room 314. The other students looked around, eyes searching. A few stifled snickers. Francesca, seated in the last row near the window, like always, blinked once, then twice, as if her name didn't belong to her anymore. She wasn't used to being addressed. I don't, she started, her voice almost swallowed by the low murmurs rippling through the classroom. Mr. Douglas waved a hand in the air, as if swatting away a fly. You'll manage. Everyone learns something here, even scholarship students. There it was, said with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. The kind of smile you get from people who pretend to be nice because they know they're supposed to. The kind that says, I see you, and I've already decided who you are. Francesca felt the heat bloom in her chest. She didn't like being looked at, and now the entire music class had turned toward her. Some students leaned over their desks to get a better view of the new girl in their elite program, as if she were a curiosity behind glass. The only black girl in the room, the only girl without a fancy folder, embroidered monogram, or expensive-looking case. Did you even, audition? Whispered Ava Sinclair from 2 rows ahead, a perfect smirk tugging at her glossed lips. Francesca didn't answer. She just kept her eyes forward, her fingers curling around the edge of her seat. No worries, Ava continued, voice sugary. You'll be fine. The violin's just, super delicate and hard. But you're here now, so go off, girl. A couple of the girls chuckled. Even some of the boys. Francesca didn't flinch, not outwardly at least. She knew better than to give anyone the satisfaction. Mr. Douglas finished calling out the list. The rest of the students were assigned instruments they'd requested or had already mastered. Piano, flute, cello, even harp. No one else got assigned something for the first time. No one else had been turned into a joke. Francesca's hands stayed in her lap for the rest of class. By the time the final bell rang, she was the first out the door, not because she was in a rush, but because she didn't want to be stopped. Or worse, offered help. The violin case they gave her was battered, brown faux leather peeling from the sides. It looked like it hadn't been opened in years. She didn't take it home. Instead, she walked to the library after school like she always did. Her mother wouldn't be off her shift at the clinic until 6. The library was warm, quiet, and familiar. Nobody watched her there. She sat in her favorite corner, just behind the fiction shelves, and pulled out her notebook. Not for music, for sketches. She drew people from memory. Faces, expressions, poses she saw in the hallways and on the bus. Sometimes she imagined whole characters, other times just eyes. She liked eyes. They said more than people did. Today, though, her pencil hovered uselessly. All she could hear was Ava's voice echoing in her head, "Go off, girl." She didn't even know what that meant. Probably something sarcastic. It didn't matter. She wasn't angry. She wasn't anything. That's what bothered her most. "Hey," came a voice. Francesca looked up quickly, startled. No one ever came to this side. It was Zach. Zach Thompson, one of the other scholarship students. She'd seen him around, never spoken. He was always wearing that oversized hoodie and sneakers that had definitely seen better days. "Didn't mean to scare you," he said, slipping his hands in his pockets. I saw you leave class. You okay?" She stared at him, not sure what to say. She wasn't used to people checking in. "Just music class," she muttered. Zach gave a dry laugh. "Yeah. Mr. Douglas is a whole mess. You got violin, huh?" She nodded. He whistled low. "Man, they really set you up. That's wild." Francesca felt something tighten in her chest. I don't care. You should. That class? It's all politics. Those kids don't even see us. Francesca frowned. I don't want to be seen. Zach tilted his head. Yeah, I used to think that too. There was a silence between them. Not awkward. Just still. Then Zach said, if you ever want to practice, like where no one's watching, I know a spot. Storage room near the auditorium. No one goes there. She blinked, surprised by the offer. Thanks, she said quietly. Zach nodded once, then walked away. She stared at his back, then looked down at her sketchpad. She started drawing again. This time, it wasn't a face. It was a violin. Francesca Langston walked through the front door at 6:17 p.m., keys jingling and exhaustion written across her face like ink stains. She still had her scrubs on, her name tag half ripped at the edge. Her hair was frizzing out from the bun it had been in for 12 hours. Francesca was at the kitchen table finishing her last bite of toast. Hey, baby, Vanessa said, walking over to kiss her daughter's forehead. How was school? Francesca shrugged. Vanessa narrowed her eyes. Uh-oh. That's your nothing happened but something definitely happened shrug. Francesca cracked a small smile. They gave me violin. Vanessa blinked. You asked for violin? No, they just gave it to me. Vanessa put down her purse. Her expression shifted. Like randomly? Francesca nodded. Did they do that to anyone else? Francesca shook her head. Vanessa sighed. Then she smiled, but it wasn't a happy one. It was the kind that mothers wear when they want to keep you safe without scaring you. Well, she said, pulling up a chair beside her daughter, guess we're gonna learn violin, huh? Francesca smiled a little wider. Later that night, when the world quieted and the apartment filled with nothing but the buzz of old pipes and the hum of a fridge that needed replacing, Francesca opened the case. The violin was scratched, the bow missing half its horsehair. One string hung loose. But it was hers now. She placed it under her chin, awkwardly, bow in hand. She didn't know what she was doing. Still, she pulled it across the strings. A low, ragged sound filled the room. Ugly, raw, real. Francesca closed her eyes and did it again. The storage room behind the auditorium was colder than Francesca expected. Cement floor, yellowing brick walls, a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling that hummed like it was annoyed to be awake. It smelled like dust and old costumes, but it was quiet, safe. She liked it here. Zach had been right. Nobody came down this way. Not the theater kids, not the janitors, not even the band director whose office sat just around the corner. Francesca found a crate to sit on and placed the violin case in front of her. She was alone, for real this time. No whispers, no mocking stares, no expectations either. Opening the case still made her chest tighten. She'd never touched a violin before last week, not really. She'd seen them online, seen professionals play them like they were extensions of their soul. She'd never imagined holding one, not until now. The first few days had been ugly. She wasn't naive about it. The strings screeched when she bowed too hard. Her fingers slipped on the fingerboard. Her grip on the bow was awkward, unsure, like the wood might bite her. It frustrated her that her hands didn't match what she heard in her head. But every day after school, she came to this room and tried again. Sometimes she brought her sketchbook and drew between attempts. Other times she just stared at the violin, memorizing it, studying its curves, its scars. It was like her, used, overlooked, still standing. She'd started watching videos on her mom's old tablet, the one with the cracked corner and slow Wi-Fi. Tutorials, performances, interviews with black violinists who talked about not seeing anyone like them growing up. That hit her hard. Like someone had reached through the screen and pulled the words out of her mouth. Francesca learned how to tune it, how to hold it properly, She even learned that one of the strings was slightly warped, which explained the dull tone she kept getting. Still, she practiced. Every single day. She'd just finished running through a basic scale when the door creaked open. She nearly dropped the bow. Zach stood in the doorway, chewing on a lollipop and nodding like he'd just walked in on an NBA tryout. "You got better." Francesca narrowed her eyes. "You spying?" He held up his hands. Nah, just figured you'd be here. You always are." She relaxed, just a little. Her shoulders stayed tense. Zach walked in, letting the door shut behind him. The sound echoed. He pulled up an old chair and spun it backward, straddling it with a grin. "You gonna be ready for the showcase?" he asked. Francesca paused. "What showcase?" "The spring recital, end of March. Douglas said everyone in the advanced class has to perform." Her stomach dropped. "I'm not in the advanced class." "You are now," he said. "Your name's on the list." "No, it's a mistake. I'm not." "Francesca," his voice softened. "You're already better than half the kids up there faking it." She looked away. "That's not true." "Okay, fine. A third." She cracked a smile before she could stop herself. "Look," Zach said, shifting. "They want to see you fail. Don't give them the satisfaction." She didn't answer. She just stared at the violin in her lap, her fingers slowly curling around the neck like it was the only thing grounding her to the floor. The next day, Mr. Douglas was standing at the front of the room when Francesca walked in. The other students had already taken their seats, chatting, adjusting their sheet music, sipping from overpriced water bottles like they were prepping for a performance on Broadway. Ava Sinclair gave her a long, deliberate once-over, then leaned to her friend and whispered something that made them both laugh. Francesca ignored it. She always did. But Mr. Douglas had a different energy today. He didn't look annoyed. He looked amused. "We'll be running recital pieces today," he said. "Everyone needs to be ready to present a portion of their performance by next week." Groans and muttering filled the room. Mr. Douglas raised a hand. Yes, I know. Life is hard. Try being a teacher." Then he looked directly at Francesca. "Miss Langston, you'll be closing the program." She blinked. "What?" Ava's eyes lit up. "I said," Mr. Douglas repeated, "you'll be the final performer, the closer. That spot's reserved for something unexpected." Francesca didn't respond. Her heart started pounding, but her face didn't move. It was a setup. She could feel it. Everyone could. "Well," Ava said sweetly, "that's going to be memorable." At home, Francesca didn't say much at dinner, just pushed the broccoli around her plate while Vanessa talked about her day at the clinic. Something about a boy swallowing a Lego and a woman who thought you could take antibiotics just in case. Vanessa paused mid-story and tilted her head. "You're quiet." Francesca shrugged. "Nothing." "Francesca, they're making me perform at the recital." Vanessa blinked. "Already?" "Last." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "Did you ask for that?" Francesca shook her head. Vanessa looked like she was chewing glass. Then she stood up, rinsed her plate, and came back to the table. "They're trying to make a point," she said quietly. "They want you to fall on your face." "I know. You gonna let them?" Francesca looked down. "I don't know." Vanessa exhaled and gently reached across the table, resting her hand on her daughter's. "You've always had to work twice as hard for half the respect. I wish I could say that changes when you grow up. It doesn't. But you've got something they can't touch. You hear music the way most people hear noise. So don't play for them. Play for you." Francesca didn't answer, but her hand gripped her fork tighter. 3 days later, she stood in the middle of the storage room, bow poised, eyes closed. She played. It was still rough, but it wasn't what it used to be. Her fingers moved with more certainty. Her grip had softened into something fluid, something natural. She hit a note cleanly and held it, letting the sound echo off the brick like a heartbeat. That's when she heard clapping. She froze, turned around. A woman stood in the doorway, thin-framed glasses, custodian's uniform. A push broom leaned beside her. "Didn't mean to interrupt," the woman said with a slight smile. "But baby, that sound, that's something real." Francesca blinked. "You heard that?" "I felt that." The woman walked in, slow, eyes kind. "You're self-taught?" Francesca nodded. "Well, damn." The woman set her broom aside. "My name's Nadine Ross. Back in the day I played Carnegie Hall. I used to tour. But now I mop up these floors and try not to cuss too loud near the kids." Francesca stared, unsure what to say. "You're stiff with your elbow," Nadine said casually, "and your bow grip's too tight. You're trying to control it instead of letting it move with you, but, girl, you've got a sound. That's not teachable." Francesca swallowed hard. "I could help you," Nadine offered. "If you want." Francesca's voice was barely above a whisper. "Why would you help me?" Nadine smiled wide. "'Cause I see myself in you, and nobody ever helped me until it was too late." The girl looked down at the violin in her hand, then back up. "Okay," she said. And for the first time since she picked up the instrument, she didn't feel alone. Rehearsal days turned into weeks. The recital loomed like a thundercloud over the heads of every student at Emerson Heights Prep. Posters were already taped to the glass doors at the main entrance, showcasing elegant fonts and silhouettes of violins, pianos, and dancers. The event was billed as a celebration of musical excellence, with gold trim and overpromises, like everything at this school. Francesca walked the halls like a ghost with a mission. Not invisible anymore, but not welcome either. She wasn't ignored. No, the silence now felt different. It was thicker, intentional. Students didn't just look through her. They looked at her and then away, like she was something under glass, part of an experiment they didn't sign up for. Only Zach still talked to her like nothing had changed. "You almost got him scared now," he said one day as they sat beneath the stairwell during lunch, cold pizza between them. "Ava's been asking around, trying to figure out what you're playing." Francesca shrugged. "Let her guess. You picked something?" He took another bite, then spoke around his chewing. "What is it?" Francesca smiled faintly. "You see." It wasn't arrogance, it was something quieter than that. A decision that had rooted itself inside her and refused to be swayed. She knew what she wanted to say. The violin was her voice now, and for once, she wasn't afraid to use it. Nadine had been meeting her almost every afternoon after school. Not in the storage room anymore, but in the back of the old theater wing, an abandoned place where no one asked questions, and the acoustics carried like silk across the walls. Nadine would sit on a crate, sipping peppermint tea from a thermos, correcting Francesca's posture with a nod or a raised eyebrow. "That wrist, watch it," she'd say. "Loose, baby, let it breathe." Francesca would adjust. "Don't chase the tempo. Let it come to you." Adjust. "Stop apologizing with your bow. You got something to say, then say it." By the second week, Francesca could play through the entire piece, a reimagined version of Strange Fruit. Slower, haunting, no lyrics, just the bow gliding across the strings, dragging something ancient and wounded out into the open. At first, Nadine had been hesitant when Francesca told her the choice. "You sure, baby? That's a heavy song." "I know. They might not take it well." "I know that, too." Nadine leaned back. "Then let's do it." Each note became a declaration, each pause a reckoning. Francesca didn't just play to perform, she played to confront. Her fingers weren't perfect, her technique was still green in places, but when she closed her eyes and pulled the bow across the strings, something came through that couldn't be taught. in music theory or drilled into her by Mr. Douglas's passive-aggressive comments. Emotion, truth, power. That was the week the teasing stopped. Even Ava, with all her practiced cruelty, had gone quiet. She still sneered in the hallways, still whispered in corners. But she hadn't said anything to Francesca's face since she passed her in the music wing and heard the tail end of her playing. Francesca saw her freeze outside the cracked door, just for a second, but it was enough. Zach confirmed it later. She's been salty ever since. You renting space in her head for free? Francesca just smiled, pulling her scarf tighter around her neck as they walked home. The night before the recital, Vanessa found her daughter still awake at midnight, sitting cross-legged on her bed, bowing silently through the air with her eyes shut. No violin, just muscle memory and breath. "You nervous?" Vanessa asked from the doorway. Francesca opened her eyes. "Not really." Her mother smiled. "I'm proud of you." Francesca looked down. "You haven't even heard it." "I don't have to," Vanessa said. "You didn't quit." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Vanessa reached into her coat pocket and pulled something out, a small silver pin shaped like a violin. "This was my grandmother's," she said, handing it to Francesca. "She taught herself too, played in church, never learned how to read music, said it didn't matter if you knew the notes, as long as you knew how to make people feel something." Francesca turned the pin over in her hand. "Thank you. You wear that tomorrow," Vanessa said, standing, "and make feel it." The recital was held in the Emerson Heights Auditorium, a vaulted space with red velvet curtains, polished floors, and a stage so clean you could see your reflection. Families poured in dressed to impress, parents with pearl earrings and pressed suits, students in matching ensembles. The buzz in the air was loud, full of expectation. Francesca waited backstage, her violin case beside her, her stomach doing a quiet, slow churn. Nadine hadn't come inside, said she didn't need to. "I'll be right outside those back doors," she'd said with a wink. "I already know how it ends." The recital began with an upbeat piano duo, then a harpist who looked like she belonged on a Disney soundtrack. Ava played third. Her piece was technically flawless, full of rapid fingerwork and exaggerated emotion. The applause afterward was thunderous. Mr. Douglas clapped harder than anyone. Francesca stood, alone, just behind the curtain. Zach passed by briefly, giving her a low nod and whispering, "Knock 'em flat." Then came her name. She stepped out. The lights were blinding. The audience was a blur. She walked to the center of the stage, placed her bow on the string, and took a breath. For a second, she thought about everything. About Mr. Douglas calling her name without looking at her, about Ava's fake encouragement, about being told over and over that she didn't belong. Then she played. The opening note sliced through the silence like a knife through still water. It wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. Each sound that followed was deliberate. Francesca didn't perform for praise. She didn't perform for recognition. She performed because she had something to say. And the room listened. You could feel it. How the crowd leaned in, how the whispers stopped, how Mr. Douglas's expression slowly unraveled from passive amusement to puzzled alertness. Halfway through the piece, Francesca felt something shift, not in her fingers, but in the room. A stillness, a breath being held. Parents straightened in their seats. Students forgot to check their phones. Even Ava from the wings stood frozen, her mouth slightly open. Francesca let the last note hang in the air for just a moment longer than needed. Then she lowered her bow. No one moved. And then, like a wave finally breaking, a roar of applause, not polite, not rehearsed, but real, startled even. Vanessa stood in the middle of the crowd, tears in her eyes. She didn't clap, she just stood, hand over her chest, smiling like her heart had just come home. Backstage, Mr. Douglas was already walking toward her. He wore a smile now, but this one was different. "Francesca," he said, voice slightly breathless, That was well done, very well done. She nodded, said nothing. Zach clapped her on the shoulder. They ain't ready, he whispered, grinning. As Francesca walked off stage, violin still in hand, she caught a glimpse through the exit doors. Nadine was there, just like she said she'd be, standing, clapping, and smiling. The next morning, everything felt off. Not in a bad way, just different. Lighter, maybe. Like a fog that had been hanging low over Francesca's world had finally lifted. She didn't float down the halls of Emerson Heights Prep. She walked, steady, head up, violin case in one hand, the silver pin from her grandmother still shining on her coat. People looked at her, not through her, not past her, at her, and it wasn't the usual stare, no smirks, no side eyes, no stifled laughter, just a strange quiet when she passed. Some students even nodded. Some smiled, awkward but genuine. One girl she didn't even know from the science building said, "Hey, you played last night, right? That was insane." Francesca nodded and kept walking. The power of being noticed without being mocked. It was surreal. Mr. Douglas didn't say much during class that day. He handed out a new sheet of music to everyone, announced a group project nobody cared about, and then stood behind his desk the rest of the period, watching her out of the corner of his eye, like he couldn't decide if she was real or not. Francesca sat in her usual seat, but it didn't feel like the same seat anymore. It felt earned. When class ended, he finally spoke. "Miss Langston?" She paused by the door. "That piece you played, did you arrange it yourself?" Francesca nodded. "With some help." "Impressive." He cleared his throat. "If you're interested, the district is hosting a regional showcase next month. Invitation only. I could put your name forward." Francesca blinked. That was new. "I'll think about it," she said. He smiled, a little too eager. "Of course. Let me know." Outside, Zach was waiting by the lockers. "Told you," he said, arms crossed, a big grin stretched across his face. "Now they want to act like they've been rooting for you the whole time." Francesca chuckled. "You were right. You better say it again so I can frame it." She nudged his shoulder with hers, laughing now. "Come on," he said. "We're celebrating. There's a taco truck down the block. I got $5 and low standards." "Come in," she said. They ate tacos on the curb, warm sun hitting their faces for the first time in what felt like forever. Between bites, they talked about everything and nothing. Music, teachers, how Ava had been uncharacteristically silent since the recital. "She probably still trying to process how you smoked her with a borrowed violin," Zach said, mouth full. Francesca smiled, licking hot sauce off her thumb. "That was never the point." "Yeah. But it was fun, right?" She didn't answer. She just smiled wider. Later that evening, Vanessa surprised her with cupcakes from the bakery down the street and a single rose in a jar. "You made that whole auditorium lean forward in their seats," she said. "You changed something in that room, baby. I felt it." Francesca looked at her mom, eyes soft. "I was so scared, though. Right before I went on." "I know. That's how you know it mattered." She pulled Francesca in, kissing her forehead. "Your grandma would have been so proud." They sat in the kitchen that night with mugs of tea, the radio playing soft jazz, and for the first time in a long time, Francesca didn't feel like a guest in her own skin. That weekend, she went to see Nadine. The old theater wing was quiet again. She found her sweeping the hallway, earbuds in, moving slow to an old soul track. "Look who's famous," Nadine said when she saw her. Francesca grinned. "You said you didn't need to hear how it ended?" "I didn't. But baby, I watched every second. Through that little crack in the back door, had my heart damn near fall out my chest." Francesca stepped forward and pulled something out of her bag. A photograph. It was of the recital stage, taken by someone in the crowd. She'd had it printed at Walgreens. In it, Francesca stood center stage, bow raised, face tilted toward the light. She handed it to Nadine. "For you." Nadine stared at it, her fingers trembling just slightly. "Look at you," she whispered. "Told you, ain't no one can bury sound like that, not when it's real." Francesca nodded. "Thank you. For everything." "You don't owe me thanks," Nadine said. "Just promise me you won't stop." "I won't." "Good," Nadine said, slipping the photo into her back pocket. "Now go make the next song louder." That Monday, a letter came in the mail from the Emerson Heights Foundation, something Vanessa nearly tossed with the rest of the junk before noticing the gold crest on the envelope. Francesca opened it carefully, scanning the words twice before her mouth dropped. "What?" Vanessa asked, eyes wide. "They created a new award," Francesca said slowly. "It's called the Monroe Merit Grant for underrepresented students in the arts." Vanessa sat down hard. "Monroe, like your grandma's name." Francesca nodded. "They're giving it to me," she added, "for making an impact through performance." Vanessa covered her mouth with her hand, then stood and pulled her daughter into the tightest hug yet. "You did more than play, baby," she whispered. "You made them feel." The news spread fast. Within a week, more than a few students started asking Francesca how she chose her piece, how long she'd been playing, whether she offered lessons. It was strange, surreal, but not uncomfortable. The school even updated their website banner with a picture from the recital. Francesca's back was turned in it, bow in mid-air, spotlight illuminating the edges of her hair. Zach joked they should start charging admission just to be her friend now. She told him he could still get in for free. The best moment, though, came a few days later when Francesca walked into the music room and saw a new student sitting alone in the back. A girl with dark skin and nervous hands, clutching a clarinet case like it might disappear. Francesca walked over. "Hey," she said. "You're new?" The girl nodded. "Just transferred." "I'm Francesca." "I know," the girl said. "You're the one who played at the recital. My mom showed me the video." Francesca smiled. "You gonna play too?" The girl hesitated. "I don't know. I'm not good." Francesca sat down beside her. "Doesn't matter. Start anyway." The girl looked up, her expression softening. And just like that, Francesca saw it happening. The thing Nadine said would come. The ripple, the change. And Francesca Langston, the quiet black girl they'd laughed at, the one they tried to make into a joke, had become the first note in a much bigger song, one that would keep playing long after the clapping stopped.